There are times when reading a book can make you think really deeply about your own experiences. Some books help you to know you're not alone. Some books can be healing.
The best books come right out of your neighborhood. You can feel the names of the streets in your mind. You know these places. You can see them. You can see the sky the writer paints in words. Sometimes the words of this writer give you a poem. A city of love, a city of culture. Streets full of life, a river of art. We paint our streets. We draw our halls, spreading our colors throughout our city, throughout our schools, showing the world how our hearts are full of the world, full of our beautiful world.
I have walked across this bridge he's talked about. I know this school. It's a different time. The prickly pear and the agave cactus have grown taller, spread across the ground, digging deep into the crevices of the street and along the fences. In the same way, my family is here, who I am at the very core, has taken root on these same very roads and fence lines, on the grounds of the school and between the homes with open doors.
A book like Tafolla, Toro helps you think of your own stories. It talks honestly about adversity, what you can overcome even as a young child. Sometimes the way to know your own story is to read someone else's.
We can listen to the characters' voices, ask questions, even connect to one another.
Tafolla Toro by Lorenzo Gomez.
The End of Innocence. It's 1992. Lorenzo is 11 years old. Mari is 9 years old.
When I was in 5th grade, my younger sister, Mari, and I would walk home from Woodrow Wilson Elementary School together. We had to walk across the Interstate 10 bridge to reach our house, which was on West Hermosa.
Hermosa, which means beautiful in Spanish. The homes were built in the 1940s. The interstate and bridge weren't so beautiful, though. It almost seemed like a streak of cruelty dividing the neighborhood home from the elementary school, where small children walked back and forth, like these two, hand in hand, so small against the concrete and chain-link passageway.
And there was nothing beautiful about my dead-end street in San Antonio, Texas. After you crossed the interstate, it was like everyone forgot about this neighborhood. It felt lonely. It felt like I needed to take care of Mari. We would always hold hands as we crossed the bridge, and it was my daily reminder that I was her big brother.
And a good big brother always takes care of his little sister.
When you cross the pedestrian bridge over the highway, it's a pretty long walk for someone in elementary school. The bridge stretches far across the speeding traffic. When I look down, I get dizzy from the view of moving 18-wheelers, cars, and trucks.
After you cross, there's this lot of empty space. An empty lot, a churchyard, lots of room for, well, things to be uncertain.
I wonder how this came to be. This road dissecting the neighborhoods. I wonder how many children walk this bridge. I wonder what they're thinking.
Mari and I had walked home across this bridge more than 100 times. It was always empty, and all we could hear were the cars passing below. On this day, we saw something we had never seen before. A crowd of big kids.
That's what we call the middle and high school students. The big kids.
And they were everywhere. As we approached the bridge, the big kids came up behind us, as if they had decided to walk home with us that day. There must have been 50 guys around, ahead of, and behind us. Mari squeezed my hand and whispered,
Lencho, why are all these big kids out?
I don't know.
As we walked up the bridge, we saw another 50 big kids coming from the other side of the bridge.
I kept my head down and gripped Mari's hand tighter. We moved to the edge to avoid getting swept up into the crowd. We were surrounded by the big kids. They didn't even seem to notice us. Something else was going on. It felt like we were two ghosts passing in between them, like they could have walked right through us if they had wanted. I picked up my pace, pulling Mari with me. As we scurried home, all I could see were red wing cowboy boots. the $200 boots construction workers buy once every 10 years.
I don't really know why I remember that detail. Some images, they just stick. This one, all those steel-toed boots and laces and pants rolled to the edges, gave me an eerie feeling. I remember my stomach sinking. I could only think of holding on to Madi and getting her home. I think I was so scared, I couldn't look at one of those big kids in the eyes. I pulled my hat down a little, as if the sun were too bright.
Because I was staring down, all I could see were their shoes. We got to our front door. I knew we shouldn't have, but our curiosity was too strong. Madi and I stayed outside, stood on the step, still wearing our backpacks that were bigger than we were, and watched. The big kids all stood there, still and quiet, for what seemed like forever, while it looked like a couple of them had talked to each other. Then, as if lightning had struck, an explosion of fists, yelling, rushing, the bridge, which had chain link fence covering the top and both sides, became the scene for a 100-man cage fight.
It's not sane.
Almost as soon as it started, a half-dozen cop cars pulled up on each end of the bridge, closing off any direct escape. The big kids then started to do things I didn't think were humanly possible. They jumped off the top of the bridge like comic book superheroes onto the access road below. They ran and leapt over 6-foot fences to get away from the cops. They went in every direction. I moved closer to my brother. I was so afraid they would see us standing there, but I couldn't move.
It's not sane.
The cops could only catch a fraction of these guys. As I watched, I thought,
It's not sane.
wow, that's the power of Red Wing boots. If I had Red Wing boots, I could do everything those guys did. I could be tough.
Later, my friends at school told me that it had been a fight between two gangs, the Lynch Mob and the Kings. Everybody seemed to be talking to know someone who had been there.
Before I saw that fight, school had been about learning. I thought the only thing I had to do was worry about being a good student and being well behaved. The fight on the bridge was the flicker of something I didn't understand about my environment to come that would leave me terrified for years to come. I no longer felt safe.
I thought for sure this fight had to be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Surely that wouldn't happen again. As I prepared for middle school, I hoped and prayed that I'd never see anything that huge and uncontrollable ever again. I wanted it to all just be a dream, that the safe world I knew was still out there.
I just want someone to say to me, I'll be there when you wake. It's not sane.
The Harvard of middle school.
My parents had plans for me to go to college, so when my mom said,
There's this new multilingual program in Tafolla Middle School. You can learn a foreign language.
This is special. I can finally learn Spanish.
A lot of Hispanics of my generation didn't learn to speak Spanish as children. The San Antonio School District had an informal policy saying they would only accept students who spoke English. So, naturally, many Spanish-speaking parents stopped teaching their children Spanish.
It's not sane.
A whole generation of Hispanic children grew up without this piece of their culture. My own family felt this firsthand. I have 7 kids, and the first 3, Danny, Denise, and Mark, all spoke Spanish as their first language. But when I put them in school, I was told,
Now, if they don't speak English, the school will not accept them.
It's not sane.
I've often felt that I'm a broken Mexican because I don't speak my mother tongue. I want to speak Spanish.
no, you're going to learn Latin because Latin will help you break down words forever. It'll help you on your SATs and in whatever you decide to study in college.
I fought her, but in the end, she was the boss. My grandma Petra had the best sense of humor, teased my mom.
Who's he going to speak Latin to? The Pope?
when I applied to the special school and got in, it was one of the highlights of my young life. To me, going to this multilingual program sounded like getting accepted into college. And I later learned the principal of Tafolla called it
The Harvard of middle schools.
I was happy about going to Tafolla, but I was also nervous. I wondered, will I live up to the specialness of this school? Am I really that smart? I know my 5th grade teacher thinks I'm that smart, but will there be other teachers like her there? I don't know.
She wanted me to be brave.
Being nervous about going to school wasn't new for me. I'd been nervous before. Like the night before going to kindergarten, I remember my mom helping me put my things together for the next day. My backpack, my tennis shoes, my shirt. She carefully laid things out for me as I watched. I can remember her placing each item gently and thoughtfully, remembering the first day of school for all of her 7 children. The one that stood out the most was my brother Mark's first day of school. My mother said Mark wouldn't let her go in with him.
No, Mom. I'm okay. I got this. Go home. I'm okay.
And he just marched into school. The rest of the Gomez clan, on the other hand, were crying soggy messes on their first day of school.
She wants me to be like Mark. She wants me to be brave.
I didn't feel brave. I was scared, and I was nervous. But I put on a brave face for my first day of kindergarten. At 5 years old, I already was pretending to be something I wasn't. As an adult, I now know I'm also telling myself this lie. I should have said,
Mom, I'm really nervous and scared.
and let her say,
It's okay for you to be nervous and scared.
the fact that I didn't speak up was the start of some bad habits in my thinking. My desire to not worry my mom was greater than the fear I was feeling. I unconsciously created a false story in my head, which was,
This is what she wants me to do. And I need to be this other person that I'm not.
He carried that fear and anxiety with him. He loved 5th grade, but he was very nervous and scared about middle school. You know, he didn't weigh more than 100 pounds until after he graduated high school.
after seeing that fight on the bridge, I was even more aware of how small and weak I was. If being brave meant being in a fight like the one on the bridge, then I was in big trouble. I should probably get some Red Wing boots, like those big kids, pronto.
Remembering my past. There are certain thoughts in your head that are like carbon monoxide. They're odorless and tasteless, but before you know it, they've poisoned your mind.
That's what happened to me. In middle school, my nervousness and anxiety tipped. I had all kinds of thoughts in my head about who I was supposed to be and who the people around me were. Many of them exaggerated, most of them untrue. The more and more I kept telling myself these stories about things that were going on, the worse it got. I was so afraid and had so much anxiety during those 3 years of middle school that I completely blocked out the memories of that time. I simply refused to remember those important years.
As an adult, I decided to go to therapy to work on the unhealthy behaviors I developed in my life. I thought I had a problem with anger, addiction, and depression. But through therapy, I realized those were symptoms of a much deeper problem. There was a deeper cause underneath those symptoms, and that was a paralyzing fear.
Write down the narrative of your life, beginning with your earliest memories about things like when you started school, who took you, how you felt.
This is the story of the years I forgot and how I made sense of them. Everything I went through then shaped everything that came after. This book, Tafolla, is a story of the shape I came out after.